The Redemption Inquiry by Michael Diamond. Part the Second, Winds of Change. Chapter 8, Krishna in Kapota. Rewind the clock a couple of years. Cross the pond. Another unlikely hero steps up. The sixth-generation hasidic savant from Mumbai, Krishna Katz. He makes like a flea and sticks to a professor of neuropathology at Oxford. The hero's gig is to map the human brain onto the map of the world. He mainly succeeds in mapping his desire onto his beloved Sita. All this intel comes from the neuropathology professor, he too among the redeemed. Once every 28 years, the burning ball slams back into its niche in the cosmic matrix, the place where it was birthed, word into matter. The sun, the warm one, Hachama, the Levitical epithet for the heavenly body jazzing up the surface of the planet with heat and light. Krishna Katz is a sixth-generation hasidic master. A little less than a century before Krishna's birth, his 21st-century forebear, Levi Katz, jettisons his life as a Chabad emissary to a large American town on the eastern seaboard. The family meanders its way to Vermont, where they found a New Age Hasidic retreat, the Assembly of Strangers. Their wanderlust is sparked by the rare coincidence on Wednesday, April 8, 2009, of Passover Eve with Birkat HaChama, the blessing of the sun. It's a bizarre holiday when we Jews load up our mojo back through the matrix of matter to the sun that it may continue its role. The theurgic blessing is recited in odd little gatherings throughout the world. Quote, "You are transported, O unutterable one, our mutability, scribe in eternity, who does the doing of creation." Unquote. Wild, a cosmic demiurgic mystery. It's all over the newspapers in 2009 for the first time ever. A handful of cities put on the dog to celebrate the occasion. A whole lot of peace, love, and Woodstock dangerously close to pagan orgy. Colliding with Passover makes it a real calendrical rarity. The previous two times Passover and the blessing of the sun crossed paths were Wednesday, April 8, 1925, and Wednesday, April 8, 1309. It won't happen again till the year 2121. Not clear anybody will be around to celebrate. 2009 is a formative year for the newly minted Katz dynasty. It takes another 112 years before the family births its penultimate Rav. He's stuck with the weird moniker for a Hasid, Krishna. That's the Mumbai effect. Krishna is taught the gematria, the numerology, of his name, permuted from Sanskrit to Hebrew every Sabbath from the day of his birth. His mother hails from the B'nai Israel community in Mumbai. Her father, Krishna's maternal grandfather, Zaidi Shraga Barachaman, is a polyglot genius, a scholar of both Sanskrit and Hebrew literature. He is also a Kohen, a 22nd century bearer of the hereditary priestly caste lineage. He was shipped off to Mumbai as a greenhorn rabbi by the elders of the assembly to immerse himself in the heady waters of subcontinental culture, to be the smiling face of pan-galactic Yiddishkeit. He and Krishna's paternal grandfather, the Mumbai Zaidi, who also happens to be a Kohen, had been chevrusas, study buddies, at the Brunoy Yeshiva in Paris. They are fellow shluchim, emissaries, schlepping to Mumbai. The fact that Shraga's only daughter is hitched to the Katz dynasty gives him interstellar nachas, inexpressible pride and joy. When the newlyweds, Krishna and Sita Katz, moved to Pittsburgh for grad school, Sita's father, Rav Chaim Barachaman HaKohen, a protege and nephew of Krishna's maternal grandfather, weeps with joy and bitterness. He considers sitting Shiva for the couple. He fears for their safety in the barely civilized country of their destination. The financial corridor that runs from Boston, Mass. Down to Washington, D.C., has by that point devolved into a series of coastal urban swamps, the Mid-Atlantic Trust Belt. A large, wet fist had pounded the Big Apple, the hub, the city of brotherly love, Charm City, and all the quaint little college towns that line the New England and Mid-Atlantic shore. What remains is a tattered patchwork of refugee centers that looks a hell of a lot like the sprawling slum of 21st century Mumbai. Mumbai was resuscitated by the Grameen Federation with a leg up from a few philanthropic Indian billionaires, a hedge against rising radicalization among slum dwellers. Grameen is out there saving the world while the U.S. is going down the tubes. Grameen's Global Social Business Summit is a first responder to the cataclysm of the corporate singularity of 2009. But their salvific volleys are unable to penetrate the heavily protectionist U.S. market. East Coast cities have been kicked to the curb by the wealthy elites who head for the highlands of Port Jervis, the Catskills, and the Green Mountains. That is, the ones who have not already taken their bats and balls and moved their game offshore. Hedge funders, reinsurers, sellers of toxic derivatives, and business politico chimeras all make out like bandits. The poor and the middle class are left holding the decaying and soggy urban bag. Hence, trust, 2 centuries of shared communal assumption, the basis of the life of cities, betrayed. Pittsburgh fares oddly better. Like other inland metropolises, embedded in coal shale fields, the unrestrained fracking of the surrounding rural areas brings them a bonanza of much-needed capital. As Mother Earth is coaxed to let fly her industrial strength flatus, simple country folk who've been bilked by big out-of-state energy companies fall sick at the poisoned cup of their own tap water. The aquifer is dosed with toxic effluents, an inherent vice in hydraulic fracturing. Environmentalists are met with stolid resistance on the part of the impoverished citizenry who are completely in the thrall of disinformation campaigns funded by fossil fuel oligarchs. The good people of Armstrong, Butler, Lawrence, and Beaver counties become fodder for the medical-industrial complex. King Faisal University Medical Center engulfs Pittsburgh and most of western Pennsylvania as its major employer, a $1 trillion a year budget in its midst. A caravan of quote-unquote zebras, medicalese for improbably horrible diseases, roll on gurneys down O'Hare Street into King Faisal's open mall. Krishna Katz becomes the go-to guy for a vast swath of the university community soon after hitting the ground in Pittsburgh. He is a medical neuroethicist at King Faisal, a polymath like his grandfather Schrager. You could ask him anything. Either he knows the answer right off, or he knows how to get it. He and Sita choose Pittsburgh, the Wild West, for postgraduate studies, he in neuroethics and she in cyber law. Reb Krishna received his smicha, rabbinic ordination, directly from his paternal grandfather, the Mumbai Zaidi, shortly after graduating from the Brunoy Yeshiva on the eve of the big Mumbai wedding. Krishna's yeshiva is precariously perched on Ile-de-France. During his stint at Brunoy, the rise of the water tables for both the Thames and the Seine basins gives them a preview of apocalypse. The yeshiva, acting on an inside tip, woos Oxford into a joint venture in the rocky bosom of the Pyrenees. The Paris flood of 2102 deals a death blow to the city's grid, billions of euros lost in the ether. As have so many European capitals, Paris goes whimpering into incoherence. The morbid silver lining is that the overwhelming epidemics of yellow fever, cholera, and dysentery reduce the surplus population. London and Oxford have not fared much better. They are keen for a retreat to higher ground. It's beginning to look inevitable. A group of Oxford moneymen enter negotiations for a lease-to-buy arrangement with Château de la Tour. They have vetted similar properties in the Scottish Highlands, but extreme weather blasts from the North Sea sink the deals. The Château de la Tour is a cluster of 4 Cathar castles in various stages of disrepair. The current owners, a failed gambling consortium, need a quick infusion of cash. The high ground there is unassailable by the current siege of lowland floods that ravage the major cities of Europe. The yeshiva chooses Krishna as the student body representative in the horse trading. He is a stellar yeshiva scholar, while at the same time having one foot squarely planted in the secular world. The yeshiva's anonymous Russian godfather gives Krishna his blessings. Before the dickering is through, Krishna wangles a side deal for a 1-year neuroscience MSc at Oxford, funded in toto by the Wellcome Trust. That's his path to Sita. That's how I met the 2 cosmic lovebirds. In that life, I am a professor of neuropathology, Newfield Department of Clinical Neurosciences. Herr Professor Dr. the Honorable Rabbi Baruch Kliansky at your service. Bernie to my students. Krishna is a shining star in the Oxford firmament. It's painful to send him off to Pittsburgh right after the wedding. I still remember the day I met him. Krishna has the misfortune to wander into my office on a day that I'm having a flaming gout attack. Not a pretty sight. I am consumed with exquisite regret for the Ricumbi hepatopate. Not worth it, its certified kosher hechsher notwithstanding. As I sit behind my desk trying to gingerly squeeze the pain out of my left foot, in walks this cherubic kid with a wispy beard, wearing a black fedora and Kapota. I'm quite sure there were bright globs of sweat on my radiant red face. Nonetheless, he addresses me crisply with the proper Yiddish greeting. Shalom Aleichem. Peace be with you, Herr Professor. To which I can barely grunt the rejoinder, Alechem Shalom. Should I come back another time? He looks genuinely concerned. I am touched. I relax a tiny bit. No, it's a bit of gout, not to worry. What can I do for you, my young chassid? We didn't see too many black hats, let alone Kapotas, in the UK anymore, since the mass exodus of Jews headed for the Holy Land at the beginning of the last century. There he stood, a 19th century apparition in my 22nd century neuropath lab. Oh, I guess the Kapota is a giveaway. He has a funny accent, I can't quite figure it. Where I come from, he continues, Kapota is a word from the yogic tradition, meaning pigeon in Sanskrit. Kind of funny, don't you think? To demonstrate, he flaps his arms, bobs his head back and forth, makes cooing noises with raised eyebrows, the coattails of his Kapota flapping in response. It's so comical that it completely disarms me. I stifle a guffaw behind my cupped hand. There is a refreshing charm about this young Hasid. I didn't know it then, but he is fast on his way to making a permanent home in my heart. Ah, the subcontinental species of pigeon. Now I can place your accent. Mumbai? So what can I do for you, Mr. Kapota? He smiles back at me. It's Rabbi Kapota, actually Krishna Katz of the B'nai Israel community of, Mumbai. He bobs his head and continues. I'm here on a welcome scholarship for the 1-year MSc gig in neuroscience. But what I really want to do is a brain mapping project with you. It's my job to schlep this information back to my community. You see, I am a shaliach, an emissary. or if you prefer, carrier pigeon for science. I return his smile, intrigued. And what exactly are you interested in mapping, my young carrier pigeon? He looks a bit abashed, shuffles his feet, and stares at the floor, a dove in the cleft of a rock. Well, this may sound naive, but I once saw a map of the brain splayed out with both hemispheres flattened and their front ends en face. You could click anywhere on the image, trace all the projections. It hyperlinked to the functions of each chunk of topography. Superb, really. My eyes widened. That's our map, my young neurocartographer. The digitizable projection map. DigProm. It's Krishna's turn to smile. Yes, I know. That's why I'm here. I saw it in an archived copy of Siam. I right away flashed on the map of the world we've studied in Yeshiva, the ancient Mercator projection, but yours was of the brain. On a lark, I searched your map for the quote-unquote site that was homologous to the Holy Land. You see, I had already decided that the Mediterranean Sea is homologous to the left Sylvian fissure. There it was, Wernicke's area. I M3'd it and discovered to my great excitement that it's the language receiver of the cerebral cortex. The Holy Land, mother to the oldest languages on the planet. By our community's way of thinking, the location of the central receptor for the divine voice, the Holy Temple. Wow! You know what I mean? I knew I had to pour myself over the whole map. You see, I want to know how this planet is wired. A little cuckoo, new? He's practically vibrating in front of me. I'm skeptical, to say the least. What could a map of the brain possibly have to do with a map of the planet? Krishna perseveres, or perseverates. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference with him. So I make an appointment to see the young Kapota during office hours. It wasn't until an hour after he left, as I close up my lab and thumb-lock the door, that I realize my pain has eased considerably. Krishna gazes into my face with the intensity of a lover. He compels me with his every demand for knowledge. It begins with that first visit during office hours and continues for a lifetime of exalted and passionate discourse. I'd really like to tell you about our functional brain imaging research. Quite the pickup line, eh? My gout, a distant memory, I am truly in my element whenever a bright young thought-gobbler comes pecking at our trough. A century ago, functional brain research was hobbled by the unreliability of studies that were chained to the mercurial clinical status of our subjects, to moment-to-moment microscopic shifts in the testing environment and equipment, and to our ignorance of the actual wiring of this most complex of all biological systems. That has totally changed. I sit back to let the young hasidic emissary lean forward and take it all in. First, with the invention of optogenetics, we're able to light up functionally related neural thoroughfares in the brains of unmolested living animals. No harm done. Eventually in humans. We send fluorescently tagged molecular ion channels into the brain that, by piggybacking on viral particles, seek out and thwack onto neurons bearing little flags saying, "Over here, chaps, X marks the spot." Our lab's innovation is to flood the brain with nanochips tuned to the particular wavelength of light emitted by the fluorescent tag. Message received. These chips then emit an ultra-precise nano-GPS signal, and voila! Neural circuit mapping in living brains has begun. Francis Crick, one of the DNA molecular map's two fathers, predicted this in a speech he gave at U.S. San Diego way back in 1999. The guy really earned his genius moniker. At the turn of the last century, the folks at what was formerly known as Sloan Kettering, now the People's Cancer Institute, were the first to deploy a crude version of the technique for treating patients. But way before that, the first widely utilizable fluorescent probe was a bugger called Chameleon. By 2013, A Stanford team had not only perfected the labeling and detection/localization technology, but they used it to control neurocircuits in parts of the brain, the heart, the inner ear, and the face. Talk about controlling the message. Inhibitors and activators tick away in the control part of the genetic sequence, along with the molecular sensors, waiting for the go signal. The tricky bit is how the light gets in. At first, via windows placed in the skulls of experimental animals or by implanted fiber optics. Not entirely harmless, I'm afraid. They even tried shining a flashlight through the skull using a supersensitive opsin, ominously dubbed JAWS. The Stanford crew could transilluminate skin to fiddle with peripheral nervous tissue. 2031 saw the big leap. Nano-LEDs at MIT. Problem solved. A fully enlightened brain. Non-invasive, pinpoint-accurate, bidirectional communication with living brains. Krishna sits in stunned attention. He had no idea any of this was possible. The young carrier pigeon's silence grows suddenly deeper. I have to nudge him. Are you following all this? I've thrown quite a lot at you. Without the slightest delay, he pipes up, Of course, Herr Professor Repkliansky, this is quite exciting. Then he leans forward and squints his eyes at me. It's also terrifying. He's rocking in his seat, both hands over his mouth, in muted awe. I completely concur. I don't dare let on that I know that the military and law enforcement blokes in the UK and the US, and most likely a profusion of foreign powers, are well into the development of optogenetic weapons, correctional tools, and quote-unquote psycho-ed devices. None of this would pass muster with an IRB. That's the crew in every scientific institution who make sure there's no repeat of the monstrous protocols of Dr. Joseph Mengele under the prurient eye of the Third Reich, or the Tuskegee experiment under the blinkered eyes of a racist U.S. Public Health Service. But who would ever know? The only reason I know of this dark matter is by way of my evil twin, Dr. Chaya Mushki-Kliansky. My sister is a more gifted neuroscientist than I. She works at the officially non-existent MI7, the Black Ops branch of the British Secret Service. There is no way I can blow the whistle on the scoundrels, knowing what I know about Mushki's handlers. They'd snuff her without a second thought. Interlude. Condensate. It's twilight. The boss asked me to step outside with him, into the cool of the evening. Something spooky is about to happen. I can feel it. I had done everything the big guy had asked for. I would hold nothing back. Some years later, even my own son, for God's sake. I have some regrets. My wife never forgave me. I tried to explain to her that our boy would be in the business too, just like his old man. But by the time we got back from the job, she was gone. Checked out. There was a rumor she took her own life, or that she kicked from the shock of knowing what the job was I took little Izzy on. I'll never know how I loved her. I still have Izzy, sickly little boy chick he turned out to be. I call out her name some nights. But back to that weird evening, outside on the lawn with the boss. He isn't much for words. I kind of have to read the tea leaves, always looking for a sign on his face of what he's really thinking. He gives me hints, makes mysterious gestures. But that night beat all, I'm telling you. He already had me pull up stakes and leave my last gig. Pop had a good business, but I got my people to go all in on the deal. You see, I always work by persuasion, more flies with honey, etc., etc. I had taken some real flack from a local big shot. Seems he had eyes for my gal. The boss got a message to him one night, and he laid off after that. So there I am, standing out on the high desert with the boss, feeling a weird mixture of gratitude and cold fear. Funny thing is I don't feel any resentment. In spite of all the fast moves and the risk, I bet all my chips on the boss. I'm waiting for his next move. He sighs and looks out at the long shadows that cross the property, the glow of the sun just below the horizon. It's beautiful, but something makes the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. Then he tells me, we're all going to work for some real heavy on the other side of the border. It isn't what I had in mind, but the boss knows I'm in. Then comes the real shocker. More than likely, we'll have to work for peanuts and put up with all kinds of abuse for a pretty long time. Said we'd get used to being strangers there. What? But I say nothing. The boss gets real quiet. Then he tells me when the time is ripe, he'll bring us back to this very spot, pockets filled with gold. I see he's dead serious. He says when we get back, he'll help us rub out all the other mobs on our turf, and we'll stake out the whole territory for ourselves. He almost smiles. I kind of relax a bit, God knows what reason. What comes next is pure Harry Houdini. Somehow the boss gets the barbecue going without my seeing how he's done it. Only then do I notice, as my eyes get used to the dim light, that the boss had hacked a bunch of critters in half and lined up the matching parts in two straight rows. Man, it was gruesome. I keep feeling like any moment the parts will leap up and recombine themselves into some kind of horrible monster. But I'm in no position to pass judgment right then. I have to shoo away a couple of buzzards that think they found a free buffet. He makes like he wants to stroll with me between those two rows of half carcasses. I gotta say, it gives me the creeps. Nearly pass out, actually. Maybe that's the idea. Sure is unforgettable. Etched in my memory like it happened yesterday. Right then he swears on anything that means anything to me, that he'll make good on his promise. It's like some kind of seance. Maybe he slipped me a Mickey Finn, I don't know. I turn around, and the barbecue and a burning torch are moving down the aisle between the parts, coming right at us. I swear, either there are little guys moving the stuff, or some kind of rope and pulley setup. Beats me. With the boss, anything is possible. By the time it's over, I'm exhausted from the sheer emotional whiplash of it. He nods goodbye. I go home and sleep like the dead. From Barachaman Sita, Covenant of the Divided Self. End of interlude. I nod to Reb Krishna. Yes, I see you appreciate the awesome power that has been unleashed upon the world. We both sit in silence for an uncomfortably long minute. You see, dear reader, I know you and my sister Chaya Mushka are watching me. I know it's just your job as apparatchiks of the cybersecurity complex, but by now, post-redemption, you should freely admit that you and all your cronies drove humanity right into the hands of the AIs. Your ceaseless need to monitor and control, to collect endless bits of trivial information and then exploit them to your own perverse ends. And your fascination with machines, mechanization, automaticity, every human function reduced to bits and bytes. Not only calculation, spatial navigation, and speech, but emotion, empathy, reciprocity, motivation, judgment, all of which required constant monitoring, constant testing of hypotheses. Total mind freak, if you'll pardon the expression. Until we could no longer draw a bright line between human and machine, inside and outside, thought and action. Did you not comprehend that you were creating a back door for the AIs to reach right inside our collective cerebral cortex and pull the plug on humanity once and for all? None of this matters now that the redemption has happened, but surely it would be healthy to do a little truth and reconciliation tango, don't you think? It's what every soul must go through willy-nilly, a metaphysical accounting, a heshbon hanefesh. Nu? But I see no reason to terrify the young rabbi any further by revealing that his wildest paranoid fantasies are already tricked out in technicolor by the very government agencies charged with safeguarding our democracies. Pardon my cynicism. Where am I? Interlude. partition. The idea that the fact of existence by itself carries along an incurable guilt is Greek. Theognis, 327. And anybody who claims that he surpasses it commits arrogance, and therefore he becomes guilty. The first half of the 6th century is a period of great social instability in Miletus, the city-state where Anaximander lives. Any attempt of excess leads to exaggerations, and each exaggeration must be corrected. All these have to be paid according to the debt. The things give justice to one another with the process of time. Justice has to destroy everything which is born. There is no external limit that can restrict the activities of men except the destruction. Arrogance is an expression of the chaotic element of human existence, and in a way, a part of the rebounding mechanism of order, because pushing it to exertions causes destruction, which is also a re-establishment. From Sir Cecil Maurice Bowra, The Greek Experience. End of interlude. So it is, with great gusto, that young Krishna digs into his obsessive mapping fantasy, mining every bit of data generated by the Human Synaptome Project and our optogenetic expansion of it. At least he'll use the information harmlessly. I must admit, the young hasid's project appeals to some atavistic impulse lodged within my own cranium. With each correlation, I feel myself lured a bit deeper. We even dig up the funds to get him a young coder from cybernetics to bird-dog him with the mapping software. That's Sita. You know where that's going. Details to follow. The main bits are fairly obvious. Once you accept Reb Krishna's assertion that the Caribbean Sea is the right Sylvian fissure, the rest is clear. I summarize for our cyber assistant. The Atlantic Ocean is the equivalent of the interhemispheric fissure between the frontal poles and the Pacific, and the Pacific is the continuation of the same fissure between the occipital poles. The whole model falls rather neatly into place, a pleasing symmetry. The continents of Africa and South America make perfect sense as the left and right temporal lobes, the seats of acoustical and rhythmic experience and intense emotion. Think of the hypnotic musics of Africa and South America, most entrancing on the planet. The left hemisphere of the brain correlates to the eastern hemisphere of the globe, the old world, source of lineage and logic. The right hemisphere of the brain is the western hemisphere, the new world, the source of innovation, and to this old worlder's way of thinking, a hotbed of twisted gestalt logic. The boundary between the frontal lobes and the parietal cortex is a bit trickier to define. We finally decide, you see, I get shanghaied into the deliberations, that the Indian subcontinent up to the Rift Valley is the left parietal cortex, and the Mexican/Central American landmass is the equivalent of the right parietal cortex. Just imagine the kabuki theater of boundary setting between adjacent functionally distinct cortical areas, boundary disputes in which the warring parties simply agree to fall on their swords in order to create a nice crisp border between two neighboring states. Apoptosis, programmed cell death, does the trick every time. Very civilized, albeit macabre. Both India and Mexico, exquisite feasts of texture and taste for the empires of the somatosensory cortex. North America divides into the right frontal cortex east of the Rockies and the right occipital cortex west of and including the Rockies. California, of course, the land of the right visual cortex. The Eurasian landmass is divided by either the Volga River or the Ural Mountains into the occipital/visual east and the frontal/executive west. The I versus the I, object versus subject. Krishna cocks an eyebrow at me, but lets me natter on, despite his burning desire to impress his hot cybernetics tutor. Age before hormones. Okay, kids, here's where it really gets exciting. when we start to look at the smaller functional subdivisions. I could see the two incipient lovebirds rolling their eyes conspiratorially, humoring the old man. I have the decency to blush and cool my jets. Krishna pipes up in pseudo-deference. Herr Professor, Dr. Kleonsky, may I? Abashed, I nod at him to take over. Right then. So it's in the details where we find the devil, no? Sita pierces him with a single eye. It doesn't take a genius to know exactly what's happening. A great shidduch, a match made in heaven. Heaven? Is that the neocortex? Never mind. I still remember the wedding in Mumbai. It literally brought heaven down to earth in the form of a monsoon. The rains kick off right at the climax of the chuppah, the wedding canopy, drenching the undaunted celebrants to their skins. The climax after the chuppah, if you'll excuse an old man's euphemism, brought all of their friends to the most unlikely place, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the following year for the birth celebration of the latest and final scion of the Katz dynasty. It warms my frozen, old, gout-ridden flesh to see the two of them nodding and cooing in the well-papered confines of my lab. Although Sita writes code as a work-study job on campus to earn a few cyber rupees, she is actually a brilliant budding jurist in Oxford's Public International Law program. She's particularly keen on M3 law, the governance of the massive multiplex matrix. She could have done the tutoring with her eyes covered and hands behind her back. But then she would have missed the vision of her love pigeon hopping and skipping before her eyes. As Krishna warbles about the motoric basis of the language and cognitive functions of the prefrontal cortex and their correlation with the control over the globe exerted by Western Europe and the eastern seaboard of North America, Sita purrs and twirls her jet-black tresses in her fingertips. I have to admit, I perk up when he gets to the bit about the superior parietal lobule being the center of numerosity, a gradient of less and more. It's absolutely brilliant. Numerosity, the gift of both the Olmec culture in Mexico and the Aryan culture in India, the guardians of the zero in each of their respective hemispheres, without which we'd all be counting on our fingers. Both incipient lovebirds sigh. Ultimately, the most immediately successful aspect of Krishna's Minding the World project, as I like to call it, is his betrothal to Sita. There just isn't time to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. In his rueful frustration, Krishna, ever the American blues aficionado, unofficially dubs the project A World of Trouble on My Mind. We archive the data before the year ends and give the two of them a royal send-off. My heart soars as I send them winging their way back to India to rejoin their respective dovecotes in Mumbai, two cosmic energies whose union brings us a little closer to the bliss of the redemption.